So it looks like the UK's education system is on the brink of a massive shakeup. A really sweeping new plan has just been put on the table. It's called Every Child Achieving and Thriving. And, it's basically a blueprint for the next decade, aiming to fundamentally change learning both in and out of the classroom. So what's really in this thing? Let's break it down. This quote right from the forward of the paper, it really gets to the heart of why all this is happening now. The world our kids are growing up in is just different. It's faster, it's more connected, but it's also got a lot more uncertainty. The argument here is that the education system we have just hasn't been able to keep up.
All right, so before we can jump into the solutions, we first have to get a handle on the problems this plan is trying to solve. And the white paper points to some pretty big challenges facing the system right now. Let's start with a number that kind of makes you stop and think. Right now, about 1 in 5 children are frequently absent from school. We're not just talking about a sick day here and there. We mean missing a day of school every 2 weeks. That kind of disengagement is a huge red flag that something isn't working for a lot of kids.
And, this feeling of being disconnected, it runs even deeper than just attendance. This isn't about test scores. It's about whether kids feel like they belong. Back in 2014, 3/4 of students said they felt like they belonged at their school. Fast forward to 2022, and that number has just plummeted to 58%. That is a massive drop. It shows more and more children just feel adrift in their own school.
And of course, all of this has a real impact on achievement. This chart right here visualizes one of the most stubborn problems in education, the attainment gap. You can just see that clear, persistent divide in GCSE scores between disadvantaged students and their classmates. It's a stark reminder that too often, a child's background is still deciding their future.
Okay, so those are the challenges. We've got rising absences, a decline in belonging, and that persistent attainment gap. So, what's the plan to fix it? Well, the white paper lays out its solution based on 3 big transformations. You can think of these as the 3 main pillars of the whole plan. The strategy is to shift the system from narrow to broad, from sidelined to included, and from withdrawn to engaging. So let's unpack what each of those actually means. The first big shift, narrow to broad, is really about rethinking the whole scope of what education even is. The idea is to get away from a system where education is just something that happens between the first and last school bell, and move toward a vision that supports a child's entire life, all the way from birth to adulthood.
And a huge part of making this happen is a new enrichment entitlement. What this means is that things like sports, art, culture, and spending time in nature, they won't be seen as luxury extras for kids whose families can afford them. The goal is to make them a core part of every single child's education.
Okay, the second pillar is this shift from sidelined to included. And this one directly takes on that feeling that too many children, especially kids with special educational needs or from disadvantaged backgrounds, have just been let down or kind of pushed to the edges of the system. So here's the crucial part. There's going to be a major push for inclusion in mainstream schools. The goal is to invest in staff and training so that a child's local school is totally equipped to meet their needs. This way, they can learn right alongside their friends and neighbors in their own community. And a final shift is withdrawn to engaging. This takes that disengagement problem we saw in the data earlier and tackles it head on. It's an acknowledgement that for a lot of families, trust in the education system has worn thin, and the plan is to actively rebuild that relationship and bring people back into the fold. So how are they going to do that? Well, one of the key ways is by making that relationship between home and school more official, more structured. The plan calls for new minimum expectations for these partnerships, things like clear communication and tools for parents, all aimed at getting everyone pulling in the same direction again. So that's the 3-part strategy, but, a plan is just a bunch of nice words without clear goals. So the final part of this paper sets out some incredibly ambitious, measurable targets for what success should look like for the kids who are in school right now. So what are the big goals here? What does success actually look like on paper? Well, the plan wants to cut that disadvantage gap we saw earlier in half. In half. It's pushing for all children to average a grade 5 or higher in their GCSEs. And looking at the beginning of their school journey, the target is to get 90% of kids meeting the phonics standard in year 1 and have 75% of 5-year-olds showing up to school ready to learn. These are the hard numbers this whole plan is going to be judged on. Look, the ambition here is undeniable, and the diagnosis of the problems feels pretty spot on. This white paper lays out a really detailed, comprehensive roadmap for change. But the ultimate question, the one that we'll only get an answer to over the next decade, is this. Is this the plan that will finally build a future where every single child, no matter their background or their needs, can actually truly achieve and thrive?